Hi to all. It's a pleasure to be with you in this conference. My presentation it will be about the effect of architecture on the cultural perception of the Palestinian society, the example of Nablus. I'm Ahmad Khalilia from Palestine State University Faculty of Architecture and Planning. The researcher began to explore Palestinian architecture by choosing the concept of ownership, which expressed the effort to change the material reality of society, and through which the authorities trying to prove its ownership by imposing their control and power and imposing a new material reality, which referred to changing identities and imposing different identities. Thus, the researcher combined a material concept with an intellectual concept in order to recognize the extent of its effect on architectural intertwined with the cultural, social, intellectual, and political awareness of Palestine society, as well as the evaluation of identity in its sense also played a major role in shaping an understanding of the city, its architecture, identity, and culture are reflected in society through new architectural information. While making the architectural analysis of Nablus, we will go through many historical stages that will enable us to understand the political and cultural structure that led to the emergence of this architectural style, which has a negative role in affecting the political and social life of the city. These factors, which affect the social, political, and cultural life of the city, vary from period to period in terms of their area of influence and power of influence. In authority side, the person who looks at Nablus from afar can see the influence of Agha and rulers in the city in every period. We see that there are palaces occupying large area in skyline of the city. Compared to ordinary houses in the city, this structure reflected the power and influence of these families in terms of its location, size, number of rooms, presence of squares and gardens. As for the economic side, one who wandered through the city's neighborhoods encounters a huge building with the large windows on the upper floors. There are sabbani, soup shops, where quality Nablus soup is made. Soup was produced here with the olive oil collected from the surrounding valley. The soap produced here were also sold all over the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, Nablus was considered one of the important centers of soup production. At the height of soup production, there were 30 soup shops in the city of Nablus. The soup shops, have become an expression of people's political status and social position. Today, this situation resembles a trade center that show the power and the status of their owners in terms of size and location. The exit phase from the old city started and the new neighborhoods began to emerge in an unusual way outside of the city walls. Mashia district has become a symbolic place in the mind of people of Nablus and has been received as the neighborhood of the rich. In this way, living outside the borders of the old city has become to mean social and economic superiority, which is reflected in the cultural aspect and collective memory of Nablus society. A newly construction building were built in the middle of garden and are surrounded by walls from all four sides. The entrance of these buildings were also built in an imposing and attractive architectural style, reflecting the economic and social power of the owner. This social observed in building is completely different from the style seen in buildings in the old city, on the old town. Balconies and terraces have started to take places in these buildings, which overlook the city and the surrounding gardens, as we see in the photo below. In addition, bathrooms and kitchen have begun to take place in new buildings, in newly built neighborhoods. In this, a concrete change reflecting the new social view with aims to provide all the services of the houses inside, unlike the old city. The presence of more and larger windows in the new building located outside the walls of the old city is striking compared to the old city building. This is due to the social life understanding that tries to open outward more than the old city in terms of architectural style, with the capacity to reveal different and new structure due to the condition. As we saw from this photo, we will understanding the typology of building and the differences that had been seen in this building. The power of private ownership become more apparent with the exterior of new buildings. This situation was different in building in the old city. The exterior doors in the residence of the old city were similar to each other and also reflected the spirit of the city. Because the exterior doors on the one hand showed that the rich and the poor were equal and that there was no distance between them. On the other hand, they ensured the security of the resident. As we see from these photos and these doors, windows, is full of rich of details and show how the rich is the honor as we see. In the windows were large and wide, unlike the existing buildings in the old city. This responsibility is now in the administrative part of the city, which is represented by the city council, because these elements which ruled the region had great power in those times. This ruling element played in political and social role in shaping the architectural style to reflect the development of stage the city was in. The development did not come about suddenly, nor was it made by force by holding a gun to the head of the resident. On the contrary, it has evolved and developed gradually, and it had connected the stage, each of which reflected the spirit of the city. When we reviewed our previous explanation regarding the law enacted by the Ottoman state regarding the ownership of the land and the reforms and regulation it imposed, we see that a new architectural approach has emerged. Because functional building made in modern style, such as police station, cafes, squares, schools, and hospital has been emerged. As we saw from these two, as we see from these two photos, we will understanding the difference between these two eras. One of them, the right one, is about the Ottoman era, and the left one, it will show the Jordanian era. The 1927 earthquake was a factor that encouraged and accelerated the extension and expansion beyond the boundaries of the old city. As we mentioned before, the British tried to organize the expansion attempts of the city by drawing up a detailed map of the city. The purchase of the land and its use as a square was an act of planning, but relatively unusual for the city of that time. This was actually an act of the state to open people up and a pre-planning of the clock tower to be built 20 years after the land was purchased. With the opening of the square, cafes also emerged, and a new social model emerged in the architecture that opened outwards. You can see the picture below, beside for this. As a result, the urban planning and expansion structure was affected. As we see from this picture, there is a new traditions and new activities have been appeared in Nablus. During the Jordanian rule, the King Hussein Palace, which is now a municipality buildings, was built. The construction of the palace was an architectural landmark at this stage. This entity was the starting point of a new phase in which a new Jordanian supported architectural style was also promoted. As seen in the picture below, during this period, the modern architectural style became a widespread, and this style continued until Nablus fell in 1967 with the Israeli occupation. This situation led to the emergence of an architectural environment in which three main elements in the field of planning and construction contradict each other. One of them is the traditional element presented by the building of the old city. Another is the elements that show themselves in the structure and draft of the colonial periods in the region close to the old city. The third is the modern architectural image was based on capitalism represented by shopping malls and commercial complexes. This building was a very huge and a very big building and didn't respect the old city buildings. In these pictures on the left, in the left belongs to the last days of the Ottoman administration. The picture on the right was taken during the Jordanian administration. The reflecting of the cultural change between these two events is very clear. We will understanding the type of streets, the type of buildings, the type of structural, social, and and the difference between these two photos. As a conclusion, thus, the political exploitation of architecture stand out at a very stage of urban formation, including the streets and suburbs of the city until today. This situation expresses the importance of architectural spaces in creating a new cultural and social awareness about the city and its inhabitants, even though they are sometimes used in an unplanned and methodless way. Thanks a lot.